Good evening, everyone. How are we doing tonight? We good? We're excited? It's so wonderful to be in a theater with you all this evening for this very special screening tonight. So welcome to the Billy Wilder Theater, home of the public programs for the UCLA Film and Television Archive. My name is Amanda Salazar. I'm a programmer with the archive and just very excited for tonight. Before we begin, as a land-grant institution, the Film and Television Archive at UCLA would like to acknowledge our presence on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Gabrielino and Tongva peoples. We are humbled to do work in this community. We would like to thank a few individuals and organizations who have also helped make tonight's screening possible. All of the screenings at the Wilder are free, thanks to a gift from an anonymous donor, and we're grateful for their support. This screening is generously supported by the Golden Globes Foundation as part of our Making Waves series at the archive. And finally, I always like to give a big shout out and special thank you to the staff that works this screening and all of our screenings that makes it run so smoothly. So I'd like to thank Lauren Brown, our house manager, all the UCLA students, and our projectionist, Leighton Hebert. So a big round of applause for all of them. And now, very briefly into tonight's program. I was introduced to Destin's work actually from another film, a title called I'm Not a Hipster. I still love that title, by the way, Destin. It's wonderful. It really spoke to me at that time when it came out. And then shortly after that, I was able to see the feature film short term 12. It was so clear to me, and probably very clear to you, for those of you that have seen this film already, how engaged and personal his films felt. And I mean, basically because of the realness of the worlds, to the characters, to the flow of his films, it feels very lived in, and through this, I felt at least very connected to what was happening on screen. When Short Term 12 first premiered 10 years ago, it felt like a welcome shock to those of us working in the independent film community and the film community at large, because it was such a talked about film, and as I had already mentioned, just a very, very special work. LA Times reviewer Kenneth Turan wrote, quote, Short Term 12 is a small wonder, a film of exceptional naturalness and empathy that takes material about troubled teenagers and young adults that could have been generic and turns it into something moving and intimate. I am honored to have Short Term 12 screened tonight among friends, collaborators, it looks like, and the audiences that maybe have never seen this film, because I've already talked to a few of you out in the lobby. Very excited to hear what you think, especially 10 years later as both a celebration and a continuation of the stories that we engage with. We are in for a real treat tonight because we also have Destin Daniel Cretton, who will be joining us in conversation after the screening. So, without further ado, please join me in welcoming Destin to the stage to say a few words before we begin.
Hi, everyone. How many of you have not seen this movie? Oh, my goodness. That is so cool. I don't know if you've ever experienced watching the same movie multiple times at different points in your life, and somehow the movie feels like a completely different movie depending on what you're going through at the time. At the time that I was making this movie, it was a very different chapter in my life. Pre-kids, I think you'll see a lot of like my fears of becoming a parent sewn throughout this movie. Since then, I now have 4 kids who are all at home right now. So I haven't seen the movie in 8 years, so I'm really curious how different it's going to feel to me. And I'm really grateful to be able to watch it alongside of many of you who have not experienced it before. And I look forward to chatting with you afterwards. Thank you. Wow.
What was it like 8 years later?
That was a trip. Yeah, it was cool.
What comes to mind? I'm so curious. Like, we all want to know. I'm sure also there are many other people here in the audience who maybe worked on the film. I'm curious how long it's been since they've seen the film too.
Yeah, whoever has worked on this movie, can you stand up real quick, everybody? There's a lot of everybody.
Look at that crew.
I'm sure many of uh, them share my emotions because when we watch a movie that we've worked on, it's like we're uh, not only engaged with the story, but we're flooded with all the memories of the production and seeing all of our old friends together up on screen, and it's it's very very emotional. Um, that honestly, that thing that I said about this movie being about being scared to be a parent, I didn't realize how obvious that was. I was like, oh my god, I was really scared to be a parent, and it's really weird to watch this, knowing that my wife is at home with. We had twins about 7 weeks ago, so my wife is at home. So I've got the baby monitor. I'm yeah. I'm very my hands are very very accustomed to shit right now. So if anybody needs anything wiped, it doesn't even matter to me.
Doesn't faze you. Well, thinking backwards, or thinking back, I would say, I always kind of like to talk about the seed, or where this kind of all began. Can you go back to the idea of this film? It started as a short film, it then became a feature, but could you maybe tell the audience about where this started for you?
When I graduated from undergraduate, and I went to a college in San Diego, Point Loma Nazarene University, and I had a communications degree. I couldn't find a job, and a friend of mine was working at the overnights at a facility and for at-risk teenagers in San Diego. And so I applied and I got the gig to work on a unit called Short Term 12. And I was very much like the Nate character. I went in wholeheartedly, with a lot of optimism about life and what I could do to help. And I was slapped in the face pretty quickly at the reality of the situation. And I wasn't, up until that point, I had not been exposed to that level of trauma. And I ended up staying there for 2 years, working there for 2 years. It's like I realized after about 4 months, you become a veteran because most people are cycling pretty quickly out of that job. And it really was. I mean, the tone of this movie is the tone of that experience, which was really traumatic at times. Like it almost felt like a war zone, but also filled with some of the highest, most beautiful highs I've ever experienced, some of the funniest moments I've ever experienced. And these teenagers, I mean, the most interesting thing was like the level between life experience between the people in charge and the kids was like not 4 or 5 years sometimes. And we were constantly telling the kids, you can't do this, you can't do that, you're getting a level drop. And it's all the things that we're doing all the time. So it was a very strange situation to be in. But I think the thing that I think surprised people about this movie at the time that it came out was the optimism that was kind of sown throughout it. And it was important to me because that optimism was something that I saw repeatedly as a way of survival that these kids had. So many of them would lean on humor, would lean on blind hope, just to survive.
Why do you think that, just to your comment, that people were surprised by that? Like, what, do you think they
It wasn't. I don't think it was very cool in the indie film world to like be optimistic. Like if you're gonna do like a dark or like a gritty movie, you should be like real gritty at the time. So, yeah, I don't know, maybe.
Well, it worked. So we got to talk about your cast. Speaking of that, and just in terms of the highs and the lows and what they were able to express. So I'm so curious about how you found the cast, because it feels so even in how you're able to move from character to character, from story to story, and everyone really had to clearly, it looks and feels very collaborative, very much an ensemble. So I'm just curious how you started the casting for the film.
We did a fairly traditional casting process with some casting directors here in LA and started holding auditions in their little office in Santa Monica, and just seeing people. Casting is always the same for me, and this was kind of the first real experience doing it, where I've written something and then I sit in a room and someone comes in and they read the words that I am so insecure about, and they read it, and I just say, "Oh my God, I'm a terrible writer."
No.
And then they leave, and I'm like, "This movie's not going to work." And then someone else comes in and they read it. I'm like, "See, it's not going to work. The scene doesn't work. Nothing about it works." They leave, and then suddenly, someone comes in and starts performing, and I forget that I wrote the words. Caitlin Deaver did that. Lakeith did that, and I suddenly feel like, holy shit, the movie's gonna work, and maybe I'm a decent writer, you know. So that's typically when I know that someone's right for the part.
And then, so when they all got together, what was that like? What was the energy like with that cast?
The energy was great, but I think that has a big part to do with a lot of the crew who's here. Everybody on set knows that, on a set, there's when you talk to actors who are on stage, like, they're constantly saying, like, that their performance can completely shift depending on what they're getting feedback from the audience. And on set, the audience is the crew. It's like literally everybody that they talk to or meet from the moment that they step on set. So part of their audience is their hair and makeup team. Part of the audience is their costume designers. Part of the audience is the PAs or whoever's like brushing shoulders with them as they're winding their way to set. And the vibe that I think we created was one that did kind of feel like the tone of this movie. Like, when we knew that we were shooting a scene that was serious, a lot of times everyone on set would just get real quiet. So the actors had to just walk through silence. And when scenes were fun, everyone had a really good time. I know John G. Jr. was like, I basically asked him to just take on the role of the camp counselor for all the actor kids, and so he was teaching them how to sing Big Booty, how to play that game. He was teaching them so anytime we were setting up, you would hear John G. Jr. and the kids off to the side playing games or laughing, and so I think a lot of the relationships that you see on screen were real off screen.
Yeah, it definitely feels that way. And speaking of to your point, the high highs and the low lows, I think that's exactly why the film works so much. These like extremes and emotions, and so many of the characters get to experience that. So it makes sense that therefore also like on set you were, respecting that environment as well. So speaking of, again, how you work with actors, I'm just kind of curious, and maybe calling attention to Brie, having worked with Brie Larson a couple of times. What is just your general approach in working with actors? And then maybe specifically, the guidance you were giving them in this film.
I honestly try not to do too much with actors, and I do think a lot of it is setting up a scene that feels as unlike a movie set or scene as possible, um, and allowing them to just do it. And so a lot of the time, my direction is like, let's just try it again. That only works if you've pre-communicated quite clearly with your actors that try it again typically means just explore. Don't do the exact same thing over and over. Just explore it some more. And usually it's a few takes of that I start to either we're in the pocket and I don't have to do anything, or I'm seeing what they're doing, and then I can create a direction based on what I'm seeing, as opposed to just going in with a super clear thing in my head and trying to talk that out with them before they even start working. That wouldn't work for me because I'm not. I don't even know what I would say.
There you go. Well, speaking of actors, is it Lakeith that has 2 music credits in this film as well?
Yeah.
How did that come about?
I mean, it is so weird watching it because, that end credit song is Lakeith, and then there's another song in the movie that is Marcus playing a song that Lakeith is rapping on. Which, if you know that, makes zero sense. But we really disguised his voice. The other thing I realized that I knew all this at the time, but I just forgot. But you mentioned you liked "I'm Not a Hipster." Caitlin Dever is listening to a song that is a fictional song that was created for the movie I'm Not a Hipster. The character in I'm Not a Hipster is a singer-songwriter, and he puts out an album called Canines. Caitlin Dever is listening to a song by Canines. So somehow these 2 universes are intertwined.
As they should be.
Yeah,
That feels right.
Of course. We really did it because we didn't have any money to buy other songs. So we're just like, that song, that end credit song, we were in the recording studio doing ADR, and Lakeith was there, and just on a whim, I was like, "Hey, we have these two tracks. Do you have anything that you can just lay down for like for these 2 songs?" And he said, "Not really, but just give me like 30 minutes." So then we kept recording, and he went off somewhere, and then he came back with all these lyrics, and then he recorded 2 songs for us.
It works very well. That's amazing. Are there perhaps any other, I guess, kind of fond memories like that, or things that just came together for this film that you could share with us now, thinking about it, having seen it 8 years later?
And I don't trust any of my memories to be accurate, but I was flooded by memories throughout this whole watch, and I don't know. It's like, I mean, I remember. I remember a lot of the editing that went into this was like, I don't know. I just kept seeing all the little, thousands of fixes that we did to create something that just looks like it's just happening. Like it's just like, but. There were a few scenes that we had. I remember that scene where the breakup between Grace and Mason outside the hospital. That we shot one night, and it was. I mean, we were on a 20-day shoot, so Bree was just so emotionally drained at the end of certain scenes, certain days, and unfortunately, the first time we shot that scene. It was at the end of a long day of tons of big emotional scenes, and then we had to wait like an hour for the sun to come down, and then we had to start shooting that breakup scene, which was a big emotional scene, and it was, we had no idea what, I mean, I barely knew how to direct at that time because I was just so tired, and so was Bree, and so that was one that we ended up having to reshoot. I don't know if it was the next day or a few days later, and unfortunately, the exact same thing happened. So we got into the scene the second time, and Bree came up to me and she said, um, "My brain's not working again." And I said, "Mine's not either." And she said, "Just tell me exactly what to do. Do you want, if you want me to cry, I'll cry. If you want me to scream, I'll scream. But I don't know how to do it." And I said, "I don't either. So let's just roll and go do some stuff." And somehow it worked, but that was a lot of editing to because we had so many variations of that scene. We just kind of threw it all on the wall.
And I was curious, in speaking of that composition, your choice of handheld camera, working with these different actors and that type of energy, the choices that you made around that, what was that like, and why?
It's like a mixture of, I mean, I think the aesthetic is quite fitting for the story. I, Brett and I we would call it composed handheld because actually everything that you see is storyboarded. It's not like we're just going there and just. We did have a storyboard that for almost every shot in that movie, but it's also practical. It allows us to shoot quicker. It allows us to spend more time in the scenes and less time, waiting for the length of time it takes to lay a dolly track or to bring things around and to make sure everything looks perfect. When you just embrace an aesthetic that is natural, it's still not easy to do, but it does allow us to lean on our actors and their performance more than just a perfect composition.
And I'm sure, again, you're thinking through a lot of what this film brought up for you, but I'm so curious of what do you take from this film into your other work? A lesson from this film?
So many. I mean, this was a lesson that I had to learn, that I continue to learn over and over. It was when you shoot something that is smaller, like a short film, which is what I did before this, and this was a relatively smaller movie, but at the time it felt huge to me. It felt impossible in pre-production. I thought it would be I was convinced it would be my last movie. Like, I did not think it would work. I often get extremely overwhelmed in pre-production, and I have since slowly learned some tricks on getting a little better sometimes, but I don't know. But one thing that I realized, that is, no matter how big the movie is or how small the movie is, it's when I'm sitting at the monitor, or some directors choose to be up there with, but I do choose to sit with the monitor. I usually take a monitor up near the actors, and I imagine that I'm sitting in a theater. And no matter how big the movie is, no matter how small the movie is, the only thing that really matters is what's inside that frame, and if you are emotionally connecting to it in some way. And that has become a weird. It's a meditative place for me when I sit in a theater and I watch someone else's movie, but it's also a very meditative place when I am on set watching an actor do a scene. It's one of those. I mean, there's other moments in life that does this, but it really is a moment in life that is so present. Like between action and cut, it is so present, and I feel so connected to the performer, that it has become almost a I don't know. It's a spiritual experience, and it's incredibly fulfilling. And it doesn't matter if you're getting paid for it. It doesn't matter if it's a $200 short film or a big budget movie. That experience is the same.
Thank you. I would like to open this up for a few questions from the audience. We have a little bit of time. We have microphones that will be coming down, and we have a question right here. So it's coming down to you. Just hold on 1 second.
I was curious, when the film came out, did you hear from your colleagues from the time that you were working with at-risk youth?
I had most of my colleagues knew about the movie as we were making it, and one of them in particular was really instrumental in helping. I mean, we brought him up as an advisor. He was working there before me and continued to work there up until the time that we were shooting this. So he was had been working for, I don't know, 15 years at that place. So he came up and sat with all of our actors. They were able to ask him questions about their characters. A lot of their characters were loosely based on stories that I had collected from interviewing other staff throughout California, and he was able to just talk to them about, backstories that related to their characters, or how his experience related to them. He also taught them how to restrain correctly. He was at the San Diego premiere, but it was a lot. I mean, I think he was in the end happy, but I think it's really weird to watch to watch something that loosely represents your existence, But since this movie came out, it has, I think, that's been one of the more rewarding things, is people who are either a part of the foster care program as foster kids, or parents, or kids who were in group homes or used to be in group homes. I've had a lot of really great conversation starters based on this movie.
Yes, right here in the middle. But we're going to wait for a mic to come down for you. It's on its way.
What were some of the tricks you use when you're overwhelmed during pre-production?
That's a great question. I would go. I would go running sometimes. That would help. I now understand at least my brain, the science behind my brain, and I'm sure this is probably the same for a lot of people. Once I'm on set and I am solving problems with a team, my anxiety almost goes to zero. It's because every time you solve a problem, particularly with other people, you get a big dopamine kick, So but the problem with pre-production is you're never actually solving anything, and all you're doing is looking at problems. And if you are decent at your job, then you have a brain that is anticipating every problem. And none of those problems can be solved in pre-production. You can just list them and come up with like how many different ways you might solve them if they happen. And it's excruciating for certain brains.
I was gonna say, and some brains love that stuff.
I know.
They
I get
love it.
so I get so jealous when I hear some directors are like, I love pre-production, and it makes me depressed when I hear that because I feel like there's something wrong with me. But the more that I understand that, the more I can figure out ways to trick my brain into solving problems and telling myself, you did a good job today. Let's go have a drink or a dinner because you solved some problems. But you do kind of have to trick the brain into feeling like it's moving forward when you're really kind of just stalling.
We had a question right here, right behind. Oh no, right, yeah. The mic is coming to you.
Yeah, I really appreciate the perspectives you bring to all your films, from the characters in Short Term 12 to even Brian Stevenson's story in Just Mercy. And my question is just kind of like, how do you allow yourself to be so vulnerable to put those perspectives when you're writing on the page?
There's usually a scene in most of my movies where I can see the moment that I embraced my panic, that I embraced when I was writing, and it's usually a scene where the character is panicking, or you just really feel their anxiety. And it's usually when that happens, it's when I'm feeling so, insecure about telling these stories. Like, I mean, Brian Stevenson he and his work just felt so important that I felt, constantly inadequate to be the person to interpret it and tell it. But I don't know. There really is. I truly believe that embracing your vulnerability, embracing your weaknesses is the ultimate way to take power back for yourself and for your creativity. I think people come to watch movies because they're looking for honesty, and if you can somehow be honest with wherever you are in the creative process, it comes out through the characters in some way. And sometimes you feel funny, and sometimes you feel insecure, and it helps to have like, oh, I can hop to this scene because I feel like shit, and that character is supposed to feel like shit, so I'll write that one. Or I'm feeling pretty good, I'll write like the speech at the end where So I do feel like this movie taught me more than anything that the creative process can be selfishly very therapeutic if you use it correctly.
Thank you. Yes, right here. Oh, can you get the mic right there?
Thanks. How has your relationship to filmmaking changed since you became a father?
I used to take pride in not making money. I was like, fuck money. I was just like, I'm an artist. I'm gonna make whatever. Like, I don't give a shit. and then you have kids, and it's like, I don't even need to make some money.
Truth, right there. We have time for just a couple more. So I'd like to, yeah, right here. Thank you.
Were there any, I guess, like happy accidents or like moments of like serendipity on set that were like unplanned and you're just like so glad happened?
Tons, yeah. So many. I mean, I feel like so many in this. I mean, I mean, everything in the movie it was written in the script, you know, like pretty, but the life that's in those scenes was definitely not written in the script. I remember reading this script like a week before we started shooting, and I read it. This is also totally psychological. Like when I'm in pre-production, like when you feel anxious, don't read your work, because it's like someone just has a cloud of negativity and failure. It just like you're just looking through this lens of like, I suck. And I read it and I was like, holy shit, this is terrible. Like, this is so boring. I read it, I was like, this is so boring. Another scene with two people sitting in a room talking to each other. There's like 4 scenes in a row and they're sitting in a room with a bed and all the rooms look the same. And so I was freaking out and trying to, but the thing is, like, once you're, you know, that's the beauty of filmmaking, is once you're on set, like, the words can come alive and actors can breathe life into it, and some of that life is through little mistakes and through little, you know, flubs or changes of lines, or and then we just kind of like, we just explore the scene, throw a lot of shit against the wall, and then we hand it to Nat and he fixes it all. Nat's our editor, he's sitting right over there. So Nat just gets like a lot of shit and then he like finds the good stuff.
When that was happening, did that calm your anxiety? Like when you were in real time, that presentness, is that what calms your anxiety?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it's a combination of that and being around like a good team. Mm-hmm. If my team was like, I don't know, like they were mean, then I would feel pretty anxious. But there is like, I mean, everybody experiences that when you're in a team and there is a conflict or a hurdle to get over. It's fun when you're in a team, right?
Well, and everyone can bring different perspectives or skill sets, and like, we're going to solve this together.
Yeah, like those, like, I don't know, like those ice baths that people are getting into these days.
Yes.
I wouldn't even put my foot into an ice bath. But when I was with the right people, I went in and I did it for 10 minutes. And it was fun, even though it fucking sucked. But we were all like doing it together. And that's kind of, I don't know, that's like filmmaking, I think.
I'm going to think about ice baths a little bit differently. In the back? Sorry. Okay, we have time for one more question. So yes, in the back. Oh, if you wait for the mic to come, please, just because.
This is a bit of a compliment. You'd mentioned about some concerns about your writing, but I really enjoyed the film, and I liked the way that you were able to create the tension and drama without drifting off into a kind of disaster. That struck me as it's a particular art that you pulled off really well.
Thank you. When I was watching it this time, I was like, man, this does kind of push into disaster quite a bit. But I'm glad you thought that. I was like, whoa, we really went there with that. That climax is pretty heavy.
Well, we'll leave it for one more question. So in the back as well, if you have a question, please.
Or a compliment. I mean, I'm down
be
with
compliments,
compliments
yes.
if you guys want to keep them coming.
I'm sure they're going to give you many compliments on your way out as well, Destin.
So you mentioned like it's really fun for you to overcome a hurdle with the team. Do you find it really hard with the casting process now being so remote? Like, have you gone through that whole entire self-taping and Zoom, and then you get to set and you're like, oh shit, like this actor is not who I thought they were. It's almost like you've been like catfished with an actor. So then it's just like, well, fuck, like, how do I do this?
That has happened to me once. But we got through it. It was like but that was actually not, that was back in the old days. I saw him. It usually happens with like smaller parts, where, and honestly, I think it happened because the actor was great in the room, and then just got really nervous being in a scene with a famous person. I think that's what happened. But I don't know. I actually weirdly like just going through self-tapes. I think it's, I don't know. Particularly when I can see like their living room, and their bedroom, or their really bad backdrop that they took care to put up. It tells me a little something about them. But I also know, oh, this is like the best that they can do, because they're not, they've maybe done it, I don't know how many times, but they're happy with this. So I don't dislike it, but I also love meeting people face to face. So.
Well, like I said, you all give him lots of compliments on the way out. But Destin, thank you
No,
so
it's fine. You
much
don't have to do
for
it.
joining us for this wonderful conversation and a screening of this film 10 years later.
Thank you. This has been so special. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you all. Have a lovely evening.